Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I stood in the back room behind the office door, staring at the wall where the cinder block met the steel shelving. 30 rows of tally marks were carved into the paint, grouped in sevens with a few faint scuffs where I'd scraped too fast. I added the newest line with the pointed edge of a wood screw, then underlined it with a rule I'd etched after the last breach. Hold ground, no exceptions. The first few weeks, I kept thinking someone would show up with a plan. Military, emergency services, anyone official. But no one came. What started as a flu outbreak became something else fast. By week 2, the hospitals shut down. By week 3, the checkpoints on the main roads were abandoned. Then came the broadcasts telling people to shelter, to wait for help. Those stopped around day 20. The infected, those things outside, don't die unless you destroy the brain. Some of them are slow and stupid, others move fast, especially if they've fed recently. Either way, the rules changed, and if I didn't change with them, I wasn't going to make it. I used to argue with the people who came through the shop when the panic first hit, tried to reason with them, told them not to take more than they needed, warned them not to point guns inside the building, explained how the ammunition reserves worked. It didn't matter. Nobody listened. Most of those people are dead now. I stopped trying to convince anyone. I turned my focus inward, reinforced every lane, bolted steel across the side walls, converted training spaces into choke points. I stopped thinking like a business owner and started thinking like an engineer. My job wasn't sales anymore, it was survival. Somewhere around week 7, I found Burke. He was curled under the axle of a wrecked pickup 3 blocks down, ribs showing, muzzle cut, paws blistered from asphalt. He didn't bark or growl when I approached, just stared at me. I kept my shotgun raised until I could see he wasn't moving, then lowered it and tossed half a stale cookies his way. He sniffed it, crawled out, and limped to my boot. I carried him back in a blanket. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't speak a word to anyone, just trained him with hand signals and small routines. Sit, stay, come, patrol the fence line, no noise unless I give the word. He picked it up fast, smarter than most people I dealt with before the fall. I started trusting him more than I'd trusted anyone else since this started. Today marked the start of week 30. I made a full perimeter walk at 7:10 in the morning. The air was dry and still, no cloud cover. The sun hit the east wall around 7:35, same as always. I moved clockwise, starting from the front barricade, where the concrete slabs were still in place. One of them had shifted slightly from wind or weight, but the steel rods drilled through the asphalt held. I checked every weld, every hinge, every cable. The soda can alarm line at the side gate was still strung tight. No sign of tampering. I tapped the solar control panel with the back of my knuckle. Display showed battery storage at 83%. No faults. Steady charge from the rooftop array. I wrote it down in the logbook. Dated and initialed like I used to back when this was a functioning business. The habit kept my head straight. Inside the building, I did a quick sweep. The shop lobby was clean. Not for appearances, just because I knew how it sounded when something wasn't right. A stray piece of broken glass, loose gravel, anything that crunched underfoot would echo louder here. I made sure the floor was always clear. The security gate across the front door was locked and reinforced. No sign anyone had come by in the night. Burke stayed low and quiet, ears forward, waiting by the inner entrance like I trained him. The old shooting lanes were now part of my second defense layer. I'd repurposed the first 5 into a funnel system. Narrow turns, blind angles, pallet barriers filled with broken bricks and cement bags. Anyone trying to rush in would lose momentum before reaching the inner hallway. Each turn favored my position, not theirs. I mounted sliding silhouettes on dollies so I could create movable cover or bait false angles. I welded metal bars across the sightlines, then added reflective tape at knee height to track movement through gaps. Everything was deliberate. Around 8:40, I took Burke out through the loading dock gate. We did the scent check. He made a slow lap along the inside edge of the fencing, nose low, no alerts. If he caught a recent trail, he'd stop and look back at me. He didn't. Whatever passed through here last night was long gone or stayed on the other side of the lot. The greenhouse survived another week. Wind tore the southern flap again, so I double-tied it with copper wire and taped over the split with weatherproof liner. Tomatoes looked fine. Kale held on. I topped off the water jugs, checked both storage tanks, and noted the levels. I'd boil everything before using it anyway. Burke drank from the main jug after I tapped it. I filtered his first. By 10 o'clock, I was up on the roof inspecting the panels. No bird mess, no shifting. Cables routed clean. I added 2 new steel brackets near the back corner to stop a lateral wiggle I noticed last week during high wind. Tension was solid now. The rooftop controller showed good draw across the board. The neighborhood across the street looked the same. 4 houses visible from this height, all wrecked, windows gone, black smears around the doors and pavement. I scanned the rooftops with the binoculars I pulled off a dead scavenger last month. Nothing moved, no smoke, no figures, no neighbors. Mara and Tarek's roof was clear. They hadn't signaled since last Thursday. I didn't see any sign of trouble, but I made a note to try the rooftop signal flag tomorrow if there's no response. By noon I was back inside, checking traps, rotating supplies, and inspecting every inch of the armory vault I built inside the training office. The bolt-action rifles were oiled and stored. The main defensive weapon, my M4 carbine, sat loaded on the side rack. Next to it were the Glock 19, a short-barrel 12-gauge pump, and 2 spare loaded magazines. I didn't expect company, but if they came, I wouldn't lose time. In the afternoon, I did repair work on the interior walkway behind the pallet wall. One of the boards had come loose near the southern bend, and I resecured it with 3-inch screws. The machete I kept at the choke point had rust forming near the hilt. I cleaned and oiled it, then re-wrapped the handle with cloth tape. Burke stayed quiet the entire time, watching. When I gave the hand signal, he moved from post to post and waited at each interior checkpoint until I tapped the steel. His discipline was tighter than most human companions I'd had before all this. He didn't ask questions. He didn't get careless. He didn't panic. I started the day with the roof array. The main panel rail on the northwest face needed realignment. It had shifted half an inch overnight from wind pressure, just enough to throw shadow over the far right edge. I climbed up before 7 in the morning, before the sun got too high, and adjusted the mounts with a half-inch socket and a torque wrench. My palms stuck to the metal as I leaned over the angle. I didn't speak. There was no one to speak to. The panels ran 3 parallel lines, 200 watts each, wired in series, each string feeding a dedicated charge controller. I had installed 3 lithium battery packs under the old counter inside the shop, salvaged from electric carts, and the system was charging now. The meter read 14.4 volts. I checked it 3 times before stepping down the ladder. Midday was the real test. By 1 in the afternoon, the controller showed full sun. Output was stable, 1,400 watts. I logged the value with a pen and clipboard I kept nailed above the breaker panel. I wrote a new rule beside it. No generator for cameras, while batteries sit above 60%. I drew a box next to the line, so I could check it each morning. 2 hours later, the inverter fan spun down. I flipped the relay that cut the camera system from gas power. The transition held. The camera rack was small. 8 feed junctions running coax through the armored conduit I had installed last winter. It pulled power through an inverter wired directly into the second battery bank. With solar input, the system ran stable even during partial shade. When I tested it, all feeds came up. North lane, south gate, rear alley, main road. 0 signal loss. I switched over the emergency lighting too, with limits. Only exterior reds after dark. No white light unless I was armed and outside. Burke had circled twice by then and was back in the interior post, paws crossed, muzzle near his feet. I gave him water from the half-gallon bottle marked post duty. I wrote that rule down too. Half-gallon per shift. No exception unless heat index hits 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I had a thermometer in each zone now, and I checked them every 2 hours. The rain catch system was next. I spent most of Tuesday clearing the first flush diverter pipe and swapping the barrel spigot. I added a new fine mesh filter on the top lid and ran a test pour from one of the backup jugs. Flow was tight but consistent. I cleaned and remarked all 6 chlorine jugs with a permanent marker. Each had the same ratio written: 8 drops per gallon, wait half an hour, shake once, do not open again for 12 hours. 2 barrels sat in rotation now. One was the active jug for cleaning and watering plants. The other was for backup only. I labeled them with colored tape: green for active, red for standby. I drilled a float valve into the top of the green barrel and tied a short overflow line to the gravel drain near the west corner of the lot. It would keep the runoff away from the building if it stormed. The greenhouse went up by the end of the week. I started bending conduit into arches using the plywood jig I had anchored against the back wall of the range building. 10-foot lengths of 3/4-inch conduit, each bent into a rough curve, screwed into rebar spikes I had hammered into the ground 2 feet deep. 12 arches total, spaced 2 feet apart. I ran top rails down the spine and tied it all with galvanized screws. The whole thing swayed at first until I cross-braced it with spare bed frame metal. I covered it in 6mm poly sheeting, UV rated, puncture resistant, cut it to length and pulled it taut over the frame, then stapled it into furring strips along the base. I double sealed the corners with overlapping folds and zip tape. A zippered roll-up vent ran along the back and front, each held by a length of PVC pipe to make daily venting easier. I set the venting times by a manual timer. Morning, 7 to 10. Afternoon, 3 to 5. Night, sealed shut unless the humidity crossed 70%. Inside the greenhouse, I filled 2 raised beds with compact soil from the building supply warehouse. Mixed it with compost from the city landscaping center. I laid out drip line tubing with adjustable flow emitters, each tied back to a 1 gallon per minute hand pump mounted on a barrel. I didn't automate that part. I wanted to control the exact time and amount. Every gallon mattered. I planted tomatoes first, then 3 rows of spinach, 1 bed of carrots, and a half bed of bush beans. I wrote the plant dates on plastic knives and pushed them into the edge of each row. I made a log entry inside the shop: temperature, humidity, plant type, planting depth, first sprout estimated arrival. Mara and Tarek had given me a small booklet with notes on spacing and light patterns. They used to work the community garden in the city before the outbreak. She was a teacher. He worked sanitation. Now they lived on the roof of an old apartment building and monitored movement below. I gave them ammunition in exchange for food and knowledge. They gave me seeds and timing schedules. I copied everything: temperature by hour, shade percentages, bug repellent mixtures that wouldn't hurt the soil. I used scrap fencing as perimeter guard against animals, and I laid a small mesh skirt around the base to prevent digging. Power consumption stabilized by Friday. Solar inputs gave me 8.5 hours of usable wattage per full Sunday. Cloud cover reduced it by nearly 30%, so I stored peak data each week and averaged it out. I wrote a new line on the inside of the panel box: cut inverter after 3 hours of sunless runtime, manual override with countdown timer only. Burke stayed with me through every build. He lay by the barrels while I measured, stayed near the frame when I bolted steel, and waited without complaint when I walked drip line. His only sound was the shake of his collar when he moved. Each night, I dried his paws and checked for cuts. I gave him half a can of wet food with dry mix. He drank from the interior jug after I poured and tested the chlorine level. That week, I heard 2 distant shots on Sunday evening. Suppressed, but close enough that it echoed off the alley gate. I checked the monitors and rotated the dome camera west. A figure had stopped by the burned bus. He was holding something long, could have been a rifle. I waited 15 minutes. He didn't move closer. I made no contact. The next morning, I checked the west fence and found one of the warning plates bent. No breach, just pressure from the outer side. I reinforced it with a second bar. Burke marked it, then sat. Water math came next. I calculated consumption: half a gallon per person per day, 1 gallon for cleaning and irrigation, 1 gallon for Burke and emergency use, 4 gallons minimum per day. I wrote the number inside the catch lid. Daily use, 4 gallons. Surplus only when tanks exceed 100 gallons total. That week, no infected reached the fence. Too hot during the day, and no movement at night. I stayed quiet. Burke watched. Power held. Water held. First tomato sprout showed under plastic by Sunday night. I marked the date. Sunday night ended without incident. No groans from the tree line. No wind strong enough to shift the gravel against the glass. Just the low murmur of the inverter fan spinning under the power rack and the faint shuffle of Burke's paws moving between porch and greenhouse. The solar charge controller had settled near 94% by nightfall, even with the freezer and cameras running. I logged the date and final output in the spiral notebook I kept clipped to the main battery board. Monday morning started slow. I did a full walk around before touching anything electrical or mechanical. Hinges looked clean. Turret arms were locked out. The body pit had dried flat, and the last carcass I dumped in had stopped moving sometime during Saturday's heatwave. I didn't smell anything fresh. Burke kept to his usual rotation. North corner first, then west fence, then back along the tire wall I'd built from 2 loads of reclaimed truck tires and cement. He stopped at the spot where I'd found the girl last month. The dirt was still different there, softer. He sat for a minute, stared at nothing, and moved on. By 11, the temperature had already passed 90. I postponed the greenhouse humidity check and brought the suppressor platforms out to the cleaning bench inside the old range shop. The far corner was now dedicated to everything subsonic and silenced. I'd carved a narrow sight channel through the front plywood, marked with blue tape at 15 yards and 25 yards. Most of the engagements I'd had inside the perimeter were at those ranges or shorter, and I needed to verify point of impact shifts again. The suppressed carbine I trusted most was the one I'd built on a forged lower from a parts kit I kept for emergencies. The upper was a direct impingement system I tuned down to run reliably with subsonic 223 rounds and a weighted buffer. The handguard had a solid lockup, no play. I installed a direct thread suppressor on the end, torqued to spec with a wrench I'd kept in a labeled bin. No shims, no crush washers, just a thread protector taped to the underside of the stock with a Sharpie note. Do not lose this again. I ran 4 test strings, 2 groups at 15 yards and 2 at 25, each with a different subsonic handload. The shift was consistent across the board, 1 inch low and ½ inch right. I logged it on blue painter's tape and stuck the tape to the side of the magazine well. On the matching upper in the back, I did the same. Every quiet rifle had to be zeroed for predictable placement. No guesswork, especially not at night. I marked the mags by function. Black tape base for defense, red for test loads, green for backup subsonics. All mags were stored loaded, spring compressed but rotated weekly. Each had a strip of cloth tape labeled with the load type, powder weight, and date packed. I also preloaded 2 short mags for emergency indoor shots, where overpenetration might matter. Subsonic soft point 300 blackout rounds with a reduced powder charge. That platform lived by the office door now, chamber empty, dust cover closed, sling looped and ready. Around 2 in the afternoon, I began final programming on the turret system. It was mounted on the west corner above the retaining wall, where fence breaches had occurred twice since early spring. The base was an old security tripod with reinforced brackets and vibration-dampened servos. I had rigged it with a motion sensor array and a low-light camera tied to the solar backup line. The turret itself wasn't automatic fire in the traditional sense. It was a camera-guided servo head paired with a suppressed .22 caliber rifle locked into a clamp mount. A motion box fed detection data into a programmable logic unit I configured through a salvage tablet. The first priority was false positive rejection. Wind-driven cans, falling branches, and my own dog had to be filtered out completely. I placed a full milk jug tied to a rope about 20 feet from the turret's detection range and let it swing back and forth for 10 minutes. The system tracked it twice but didn't flag it as a threat once I narrowed the motion window. Burke walked into frame, sniffed the jug, sat, and stared up at the lens. No alert. That was good. Then I ran a controlled test. I stood behind a clear panel 20 feet off to the side, and triggered a dummy movement using a broom taped to a thermal pack. The turret recognized the shape and heat, turned with a slight delay, and locked in. I waited. It did not fire. That was also correct. I had not set the fire control relay. When I toggled the override switch and raised a bright yellow flag behind the panel, the turret sent a single suppressed shot into the jug. The camera froze, logged, and reset to neutral. I walked over and checked the backstop. The bullet had passed cleanly through and buried into the rubber matting I had rigged behind the target zone. Zero over-penetration. No ricochet. Satisfied, I walked back inside and wrote in sharp marker on the interior dry erase board, "Turret armed. Away only." That night, the power draw dipped below 70% just before midnight. I cut the freezer circuit and moved 2 packs into the cooler with salt ice and straw insulation. I stayed up late organizing tools and rechecking the greenhouse timers. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I took Burke out for a final sweep. He halted near the north tree line. I crouched low and raised the suppressed carbine. We waited in silence for almost 2 minutes. When the shape finally moved, it was a crawler, missing a leg, dragging what was left of its belly across the gravel, leaving a faint smear behind. Burke waited until it was within 6 yards of the outer fence before shifting sideways and giving a single low growl. I tapped twice on the fence post. He turned and bolted back behind cover. I took the shot. Subsonic 223, through the scope, wind drift almost nothing. The infected dropped without a sound. That week, I started folding a new map. Tarek's advice came back when I spotted a cluster of infected huddled in the ruins of an old-school bus yard. He called them nests, places where the undead gathered in numbers during heat waves or colder spells. I marked the location with a red marker, dated it, an estimated count, 15 to 20 minimum. Burke spotted them first. He barked once, too loud, and then looked at me like he realized his mistake. I made him sit, wait, then walked us back in silence. That mistake reminded me of the first time he got too close to one of them. It was week 7. I had just started opening the West End again, looking for parts. We walked into a feed store that had been stripped of everything but a few broken pallets and a rotting deer carcass. There was one infected left inside, caught between a freezer and an overturned cart. It snapped at us, wedged tight. Before I could lift my carbine, Burke charged. He clamped his jaws on the thing's forearm and ripped it backward until the body slammed against the wall and stopped moving. I saw the piece of grey flesh in Burke's mouth. I shouted. He dropped it, panting. We ran back to the truck and I locked him in a wire cage inside the garage when we got home. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I checked his eyes every hour, looked for tremors, anything strange. By the 3rd day, I realized he was fine. He didn't get sick. He didn't change. But he didn't trust me either. He sat in the back corner and wouldn't meet my eyes. Even after I opened the cage, he avoided me. It took 2 packs of stale crackers and a couple hours of sitting in silence before he came close again. I held out a biscuit. He didn't take it, just stared. Eventually he crept over and nudged my hand. That was it. He forgave me. And since then, he waits for the signal. When I tap twice on any hard surface, he knows what to do. He circles, draws them in, never gets close enough to bite. Never again. That behavior became part of our system. Every morning, same as power checks and water testing, I gave him a command run. Stay by the shed, wait at the corner post, scent check along the south path, return on signal. No barking unless told. That rule saved us twice last month when a group of infected passed along the outer fence line and kept moving without noticing us. He stayed frozen the whole time. On Friday, I built the first version of the body corral. It was just a sloped pit with plastic sheeting, gravel, and bleach poured in layers. I used a wheelbarrow to drag any intruder corpses inside, covered them with scrap insulation board, and taped down the seams. In heat like this, the smell still crept out, but it stayed manageable. No flies, no digging. By Sunday, I logged the week as the quietest yet. Power remained above 80% every night. Water output from the rain diverter reached 6 gallons average per day, and the turret had not once fired without cause. That night, I let Burke sleep closer to the greenhouse, door open. He stayed alert the whole time. I marked the date and added a new rule to the board. No hesitations. If they're inside, they're a threat. I left just after 4:30 in the morning. Burke stayed behind this time. I gave him a full ration and set the turret to perimeter only, motion ignore up to his height. Active zones trimmed to 80 degrees on the north and west sides. The board read clear, weather read dry. The battery reserve held at 87%, more than enough to cover the cameras while I was gone. One backup panel angled toward the shed to charge the radio bank just in case something shorted out while I was gone. The drive took me just over 40 minutes. I stayed off main roads. The route cut around a truck graveyard and past one infected nest I had marked weeks earlier on the northern ridge, a school gym that now sat under a full tarp of green-black mold and broken windows. I didn't slow down. By 5:15, I pulled the truck behind the warehouse. No signage, no corporate paint, just a beige metal unit I'd been inside once, years ago, back when I still made bulk orders. Most distributors had a few quiet addresses like this. No storefront, no open dock. I parked behind a dead cargo trailer and approached the service roll-up on the side. The chain was still looped through the handle. I cut it clean with the bolt cutters. No alarms, no noise. I unspooled the pry bar and worked the wedges out of the roll track without damaging the seal. It opened smoothly. No resistance. I kept my light off. Used ambient spill from the early sunrise. Inside, I pulled the door shut behind me and slid a manual wedge into place. The air smelled like dust and motor oil. No mold, no rot. The interior racks were still in position, shelving intact, pallets covered in shrink wrap. I moved quickly but controlled. I only grabbed what could fit inside a tarp-tied cavity between the wheel wells. No loose items. No high center of gravity weight. First was a sealed crate of canned chili, expiration 5 years out. Then, 2 boxes of diesel additive, 2 cases of iodine tabs, and 3 crates of clean .308 Winchester. I found 4 M62 high-explosive grenades packed in foam and sealed with a distributor tag I recognized from the range order form in January. All of it went under the thermal tarp. There was a shelf near the back with 3 Claymore-style directional mines, pre-wired, safety pins still intact. I wrapped them in fiber towels, tucked them in a milk crate, and stuffed newspaper between them until there was no shift. Next to that were 2 motion-activated mines. Infrared trip, built-in delay. I logged the serial numbers on the underside of my clipboard and wrapped those in thick-cut rubber sheets from a pallet skid. I found 2 rounds for the M79 grenade launcher. 1 smoke, 1 anti-personnel. I didn't even have to decide. I took both. I left flashbangs, 2 unpredictable. I took 1 telescoping baton from a case of 20, tucked it in the glove box as backup. Everything else that looked good but wouldn't store right, I left in place and made a quick scribbled map on my field pad. I wrote "second pass possible, south row only" in thick letters across the page and folded it into my side pocket. By the time I rolled out, it was 6:20. The sun was just above the tree line, no infected in sight. I took a secondary loop around the perimeter and hit the east side gravel to avoid road glare. Got home around 7:10. Burke met me at the outer post. He didn't bark, just followed me around the truck like it was part of a drill. I fed him and went straight to cleanup. Each crate was hand-wiped. I removed all outer markings, peeled any shipping tags, scraped barcodes if visible. I made sure the outer layer of canned goods showed no rust or denting, sorted by date, and labeled by code. I placed the motion mines in a cool locker under the former fridge space with a handwritten note taped to the inside lid. "Do not touch, armed via switch only." The claymores went into the inner lockbox in the reinforced closet under the stairwell with a copy of the wiring diagram tucked in the lid. The ammo was shelved by caliber. Each case had a blue tape strip with the lot number, grain weight, and purpose. 1 set marked for long range, 1 for zeroing practice, 1 for emergencies only. I labeled 2 new steel magazines with red tape, subsonic only. The rest went into the main rack, spine out numbered. I built the new minefield plan on paper, then walked the outer perimeter with a second copy and marked off distance using step counts and pre-measured tape. Each mine would cover only choke points, tight turns between containers, approach lanes under trees, spots where vehicles might break speed but couldn't maneuver. I staked a set of flags and wrote the positions down on a clean sheet labeled Field 1, active only on threat level 2. Trigger rules went up on the wall inside the office. Mines are for vehicles, ladders and rushes, not for travelers. Never set and forget. Every armed mine is mapped, dated and has a reason. I made 3 laminated copies of the safe lane overlay, one under the desk, one inside my vest, and one tucked under Burke's bedding inside the kennel. I spent the next day doing range confirmation. The old paper targets were long gone, so now my drills were against the infected themselves. I cleared a lane 100 feet out and sat behind the shooting bench for most of the morning. I used a suppressed bolt action chambered in 308 with subsonics. Clean shots only, no rush. I waited until one stumbled into view, then fired, waited, recorded. Burke sat beside me, silent until I hit. Sometimes he would bark once. Sometimes he would glance sideways like he knew I'd missed by an inch. On the third shot, one of the infected lunged at the sound of impact, but tripped over a root. Burke let out a snort and poured the dirt. I used the wind caps on the ports to keep the sound and brass under control. No echoes. I collected every casing by hand and sorted them in a labeled box for reloads later. By afternoon, I had cleared 8 infected from the surrounding zone. I only used extra ammo when I was too tired to care, but I never let it go to waste. One claymore went into the east fallback wall slot, not armed, just positioned. I marked it with red chalk and flagged it in the mine log as dummy placeholder, visual deterrent. I didn't trust myself to arm that one yet. The real wiring would wait until I knew I wouldn't be distracted. I built a new weapons checklist that night. First, subsonics for range control. Second, suppressed rifles stay inside the perimeter. Third, grenades only on contact. And fourth, launcher rounds secured, not loaded. I wrote one last thing on the whiteboard before locking down. Don't get fancy. Shoot straight. Think clear. That night, I let Burke curl up inside the office again. He'd earned it. I locked the outer door, flipped the turret to watch only, and backed up the camera footage to the external drive. Before I turned in, I added one last note to the board. Resupply complete. Mines not active. Fence clear. No excuses. I was asleep by 11:40. No dreams. Just rest. The kind that only comes when the weight shifts from your shoulders to your planning. I left the shop just after 8 o'clock in the morning. Burke came with me this time. I brought the long case bag, packed tight with 5 loaded magazines, 2 bottles of water, and the replacement battery Tarek had asked for last time. Weather was steady, mid-70s, dry, slight breeze from the east. The sky was clean, no haze, no storm edge. It felt like a travel day. I locked the front gate, walked the perimeter one last time, and made sure the turret was powered down completely. Camera boards switched to solar only, motion logs backed up. Everything that could be turned off without risk was off. If someone came while I was gone, they'd have to work to get in, and there wouldn't be much left worth stealing without a serious plan. Mara and Tarek didn't live far, less than 5 miles, but I never took a straight line. Too many old nests, too many burned-out intersections with no cover. The route I used took me through an alley behind a half-collapsed church, around a long drainage channel, and over a footbridge built from a metal gate and 2 shopping carts. It wasn't elegant, but it worked, and nobody else had been dumb enough to try it when the creek ran full. I knew the timing. This late in the dry season, it was nothing but cracked mud and bugs. By 9:10, we were 2 blocks from their place. I did the whistle, short, low, 2 pulses. Burke sat and waited without command. 1 minute later, the roof hatch opened and Tarek's head popped up. He waved, slow and low. Same signal every time. Safe. Come up, Wayne. The ladder was still old conduit and wrapped wire. It groaned like it always did, but it held. Once I reached the rooftop, I saw the layout hadn't changed much. Tar patches still covered 2/3 of the roof. Rain barrels lined the north edge, black, with faded white paint marking levels. A plain down door acted as a bench near the access hatch. There were coffee cans everywhere, some rusted, some still shiny. Most held herbs, basil, chives, even a few stalks of something woody I didn't recognize. A line of shirts hung on a braided cord tied between 2 old AC units. Every piece of space was used. Intentional, tight. It looked like a camp made by people who wanted to live, not just survive. Mara gave me a box first thing. Cardboard, wrapped in duct tape. She pointed to the edge. Written in thick black marker, heirloom seeds, dry only, plant week 34 to 36. Inside were sealed packets in repurposed foil, folded and labeled. Beans, tomatoes, peppers, squash, and 3 I didn't recognize. I handed over the radio battery, then reached into the long case and gave them a small ammo bag, 60 rounds of 9mm and 40 of 223. Mara raised her eyebrows. I just nodded. The pistol and the rifles they had came from me in February. No good trading weapons without a way to keep them fed. Tarek brought out a folded map next. Paper, waxed edges, hand-labeled. He pointed to 3 blocks with blue circles. Cool basements, he said. Holds scent. Draws in clusters when the air shifts. Use caution here in the afternoons. He flipped the map and pointed to a pair of alleys drawn in red. Wind alley. Trash chutes on both sides. Good for pushing noise in one direction if you need to bait a group. Mara handed me a rolled piece of linen with 4 hand-painted symbols. One was the whistle signal I already knew. One was new, a square with a slash through it. That's ours for a nearby nest, she said. You see that marked on concrete or mailboxes. Stay alert. Means at least 4 or 5 are cycling in the area. I copied all of it to my field pad, redrew the symbols, and burned the linen roll in their barrel after I memorized it. No sense leaving intel behind if something happened to them. They gave me a small jar of dried chili to take back. Half spice, half morale boost. I left them a folding knife I wasn't using and one of the mid-sized lithium packs with a hand crank. I told them I'd swing back around in 10 days. Same time window, same route. Tarek agreed, and Mara said she'd prep more notes on soil mold and dry season pests. We left by 11 o'clock. I took a longer route back. Wanted to verify if one of the tire barricades near the gas station had been moved. It hadn't. Still chained. Still smoke black from the last fire. I counted 2 infected near the laundromat and avoided the block completely. Burke kept pace, silent the whole way. Back at the shop, I locked the outer gate, flipped the solar bank from standby to active, and checked turret logs. No alerts, no motion. Power held at 91%. Temp inside the main office was steady. I unpacked the seeds and sorted by label, used clothespins to hang the empty foil sheets in the shed for reference. Then I walked out to the greenhouse. I started by checking the soil temperature. Tarek had told me I needed a steady low 70s base before planting anything sensitive. The probe read 74. That was enough. I laid out a new row and used my old measuring stick to set spacing. 9 inches for climbing beans, 12 for squash. Everything was marked with a plastic knife pushed into the soil, date written in marker. I used cut cloth strips and a few more clothespins to set the vine training lines on the western edge. Sun angle would support growth through the afternoon without overheating the root base. Burke lay in the shade by the greenhouse door. He watched every movement, head tilted just enough to show he was alert. I didn't speak to him unless it was necessary. He seemed to know this was routine work, not active patrol. He stayed put. By 4 o'clock, all transplant beds were set. Water was measured and slow-fed through the drip line float system. I marked the greenhouse frame in permanent marker. First harvest expected, week 36 to 38. Then I stepped back, looked at the plastic roof for any new condensation traps or heat bubbles. Everything looked solid. Vent flaps opened just enough. No mildew streaks. It breathed right, finally. I took the chili inside, portioned half into a sealed jar, and added the rest to a dry food mix I kept for days when taste actually mattered. I logged the day, updated the board, and rewrote one of the rules. Trade equals survival. Don't miss schedule. Before turning in, I did one last scan of the cameras. No movement. Night was clear. Burke was already curled up by the main door when I clicked off the lights. I sat for a while, going through the map from Tarek one more time, redrawing every circle and line into my own copy. I wanted it internal, not just paper deep. By the time the first light hit the east wall, the air had that thin clarity that comes after a full night without wind. I checked the monitors again, confirmed that the turret logs showed nothing unusual overnight, and wrote the time and battery percentage on the pad. Then I walked the fence line starting from the front pallet curve. The wedge was a concept as much as it was a piece of ground, a section where movement naturally collected because of the topography and the pallet layout I had built. I counted the heads as I moved, one by one, not by sound, but by sight through the camera feed, and the small gaps I had left in the pallet wall to keep a clean line of fire. At first it was 3 near the north corner, then 6 along the ditch, then another cluster that had formed near the old bus stop. By 10 in the morning, they were feeding in numbers, and by noon the total along the immediate perimeter had tripled from the day before. I sat on the bench behind the counter and wrote the first line. Migration push. Count near fence, 30 to 40. I logged distances in yards and set a cadence plan on the whiteboard. 2 suppressed shots, pause, 1 suppressed shot, pause, rotate ports, hydrate on the minute. I did not fire for an hour. That was deliberate. Noise draws. The first rule of wedge work is to be the least interesting thing in earshot. My second rule is that you cannot be lazy with timing. For 60 minutes I watched their drift pattern. They moved with the wind, slow and clustered, with a few that lurched and tested the fence. Some tried to climb under loose pallet edges. Some pushed against the chain link at spots where I had welded in extra crossbars, but not enough. I tightened the tension on 3 lines, added a nail to a loose board, and tightened a bolt on the far post. Burke walked the inner lane and sat at each checkpoint until I tapped the steel. He gave me a look that meant he understood the plan. I gave him a half cup of water and recorded the time, because hydration scheduling is part of discipline. When the wedge filled to the threshold I had marked on the pebble path, 28 heads in the primary arc, I moved to the first firing port. The port angles are measured and labeled in inches from the bench lip to the center of the target zone. I confirmed the backstop line on the camera and the distance marker. My suppressed carbine was in position with a magazine labeled subsonic defense in the well. I checked the bolt, confirmed chamber clear with a 1/4 inch visual, then loaded and closed the bolt. I settled, picked a single head that presented a stable target, and squeezed off 2 rounds. 2 shots, slow and controlled. I kept the pauses exact, 4 seconds between the pair, and then 7 seconds before the single. The sequence gave me time to verify drop, check for drift, and confirm no one else had moved into line of fire. After 3 cycles, the wedge had thinned where I wanted it to. They bunched differently now. Some shifted toward the culvert, some drifted back into the open field. That was the point. Move them without turning the entire block into a light show. I logged every detail. Magazine 1, rounds fired 6. Point of impact confirmed an inch low at 15 yards, with subsonic 223 handloads. Wind at 10 miles per hour from the northeast. No ricochet detected on the backstop. I wrote the notation, then walked out with the hooked pole and the tow strap for bodywork. Dragging corpses is not poetic, it is a chore. I hooked the strap under the shoulder joint where the fabric held, pulled the body away from the pallet line, carried it to the ditch, and set it with its head facing downstream. I sprayed bleach mixed 1 to 10 on the hands and gloves after each movement, and placed each used glove in a sealed contractor bag. I changed gloves between every pull, rinsed the pole, and logged the time. The work took method and rhythm. Hook, pull, knee set, shuffle, stop. No sudden moves. I did 4 bodies on the first pass, then went back and checked my ports again for dust or mud that could shift 0. The wedge cycles repeated through afternoon. Each time I rotated ports to avoid pattern recognition and to distribute the acoustic signature so a listening group wouldn't be able to map my exact bench angle. When the angle presented weak, I moved back and used the shotguns for suppression only at the outer posts where the fence had to be defended from a close approach. I used the 12 gauge with slugs only when a vehicle tried to push through the curve. Guns are tools and math, not theater. I cut each action down to steps and wrote them on the whiteboard. Port rotate every 2 cycles. Count before and after. No more than 10 rounds per 10-minute window unless vehicle present. Burke sat off to the side, watchful, and at the end of the day the wedge had shifted twice in my favor. I recorded approximate hour-by-hour counts and the drain on the magazine supply. Around dusk, after the sun tipped the rooftops and shadows grew long on the pavement, I ran the roof bridge drill. I had practiced this route 3 times since I built the hinges. Step up, latch, walk 12 paces to the middle, cross-step on the boards, pause, mount the truck roof, drop to the canopy, and then slide down into the pallet alley. I timed it with a watch. First run, empty, dry, clean. I made it in 68 seconds. With Burke harnessed and moving at my side, the return took 92 seconds. I wrote both times on the wall in permanent marker and circled them. The bridge hinge checked tight. I greased the pins. The plank showed minimal flex but no cracking. If the lower floor became compromised, the bridge gives me an exit with gear and dog in under 2 minutes. That margin counts. Evening brought a different challenge. More infected moved in along the creek as noise from a collapse downtown carried like distant thunder. Some of them that would have drifted past now tested the chain link with their hands, pressing and pulling. I switched the turret from watch only to targeted suppression and allowed it to engage any that crossed the inner line past the pallet curve. The turret lining was deliberate, small arms only in measured bursts to break crowd momentum. It took 2 bursts to create a gap large enough for me to drag a heavier body into the corral without bringing extra attention. I logged turret firings with times and angles and then reset the camera to record on motion for the night. At midnight, the wedge had finished its cycle. Numbers thinned as the group moved on toward the west lot, where a shallow wash pooled and cooled in the night. I walked the perimeter again, checked trip lines, and tightened 2 that had loosened from repeated weather cycles. I sprayed bleach on each rail and handled the ridge straps with gloves still fresh from the morning change. I packed the hook and strap back into the case, counted magazines, and updated the tally on the supply board. Water consumption for the day rose by 3 gallons because of sweat and because I dragged more than usual. I poured 1 measured gallon into the kettle, boiled it for 10 minutes, added 3 drops of chlorine per gallon, and poured 2 cups into my canteen. Hydration is not an abstract thing. It is numbers and measurable effects. Before sleep, I wrote the final line. Roof route, 68 seconds clear, 92 with dog, wedge holds, rotate ports, mine checks at dawn. I added a note to self to disarm 1 dummy mine and replace a clip spring on the subsonic carbine. Burke curled at my feet and stayed still. I looked at the tally marks one last time and ran the checklist by memory. Battery levels, turret feed, number of magazines, water jugs, hook in place, bridge hinges greased. I clicked off the lights and left 1 small red LED for the camera that always did a soft blink when everything was set. The wedge worked because I treated it like a machine, not a battle. You run a machine the way you would run a generator. You measure its inputs. You maintain its parts. That is how you keep a place intact when the rest of the city slides. I woke to a tone from the external speaker at 5:30. It was the wrong tone. My hand went to the belt before I was up from the cot. The turret sent me a short vibration alert and the monitor displayed a truck parked at the curb. I ran through the checklist with half my brain awake. Batteries, turret status, mine log. The truck was a dark cab with a makeshift rack on the bed. No plates. 2 men were out of it, moving slow, circling the pallet curve like they were measuring angles. One of them wore a reflective vest that caught the morning light. The other carried a length of strap. They looked at the curve, and then at the gate, and then at their partner, who remained by the truck. I let the morning stretch. I did not speak through the intercom. They tested the chain on the front twice, just to see if it would give. The cans rattled. The man with the strap probed the edge where I had welded a second post last month. He found the weak seam and cursed softly. A third vehicle had rolled up around the corner and stopped. 2 men got out with a ladder folded across the hood. That was the moment I decided I would not waste more time telling people to leave. Words mean nothing to people who bring a ladder. I fed the turret a live feed focused on the curve and readied the grenade launcher. The launcher was secured, but I had rounds accessible in a foam-lined case. I did not want to use it. I did not want the flare and the smoke, but the pickup had been used as a battering ram once before in another block, and I remembered the sound. If they got the ladder against the fence and started climbing, while the infected drifted in behind them, it would be a cascade I could not stop with a few suppressed rounds. I dialed the tablet to the firing solution, lined up the angle for a disabling hit in the engine bay, and kept my finger on the manual override. The first man grabbed the strap and started to snake it around the far post. His hands were quick. He had done this before. The second man readied the ladder. The driver revved to get some momentum. I watched the line move on the camera and checked the wind. Wind was negligible. Range to the engine block was within effective distance for a single grenade launcher round, designed to disable, not to create wide fragmentation in a populated lot. I toggled the safety off, took a breath, and pulled the trigger. The round hit the radiator and engine bay. The truck heaved, smoke rose, and the driver spun the steering wheel. One man jumped back and the strap went slack. The other man dropped the ladder and cursed. A couple of figures in the truck bed spilled out and ran. There was no spectacle. The truck stalled. A small fire started near the fuse box and melted plastic. The men scattered down the street. 2 of them went for the ditch. One crashed into a pile of rusted shopping carts and disappeared behind it. The remaining man ran south toward the bus lot. He was moving fast. I recorded their plates. Partial, blurred, but enough to note that the vehicle had a welded rack and homemade armor on the bed. They had intention. They had practice. After the launcher round, the lot drew attention. The smoke pulled a cluster from the east side culvert. Not a migration, but enough to push bodies toward the fence. The wedge started to fill as the traffic sound masked the launcher report. I switched to the cadence I used for migration cycles. 2 suppressed shots. Wait. 1 shot. Wait. Rotate ports. The turret picked up the slack on angles I could not see and added measured bursts to break momentum. I worked methodically and logged every action. My mind would not race. It had responsibilities, ammunition counts, mine status, which fallback gate to open if the inner lane was breached. Within 30 minutes, the raiders had regrouped down the block. They tested a different angle and tried to push a small utility truck toward the curve via a tow strap. That driver didn't understand the math of resistance at my barrier. He started revving to gain momentum and stalled twice. I fired 3 rounds into the front tires of that truck, clean shots, minimal spatter, and it rolled back. That was enough for 2 men to bail and run. For a few seconds, the street looked like a cleaning sweep from the old days. Humans moving fast, deciding whether to fight or flee, making choices I did not want to be part of. I did not fire on people who were not actively attacking the line. When one of the raiders stood at the corner and waved his hands like a negotiator, I kept the intercom off. Our rules on the whiteboard were clear. Talk once. If they touched a barrier, they risked equipment. If they brought ladders, the answer was non-negotiable. The man who tried the ladder earlier came in a second after the first charge. He limped away with scratches and oath stitches. He slipped into the shade and died while trying to adjust his haul. It was quick. It was not pretty. I did not celebrate. Burke did his job without mistake. At the first smell of burned oil and the spark of heat near the radiator, he moved in a pattern I now recognized as cover and distract. He trotted to the far gate and barked once, a short, sharp sound, and then returned to the bench and sat. The signal meant, check that corner when it clears. He never got close enough to be grabbed, never lunged, never risked bite. That is the difference between training and instinct. He had both now. I kept him calm with clear commands and a measured treat each time he completed the movement. The fire from the disabled truck threatened the pallet curve, so I pulled the hose line and doused the heat. One of the pellets of burning plastic had lodged on a cardboard-wrapped pallet and smoldered. It took 3 quick passes to put out the ember, with a measured spray and a shovel to turn the wet debris into the ditch. If flames catch this wood, the whole curve loses integrity. That was a short, focused firefight I did not want to get into. The aim is always to preserve barriers, not to win a spectacle. When the raiders backed off to regroup, their driver left a tool bag behind near the burned truck. I did not rush to collect it. Instead, I sent a drone sweep across the east block and watched the men pacing. One of them slipped into a storefront and came out with a small propane tank. That signaled they were not leaving. They wanted the truck towed or pushed. That meant they would be back in force, or worse, come with explosives. I doubled the phone watch on the rooftop line with Tarek and Mara and sent a single short whistle code across the agreed pattern. No answer. That made my plans shorter. Escalate the deterrence and prepare for direct contact. I armed the minefield for a single lane only. The map I had taped under my desk had the positions in exact step counts. I went out with a hand tool and laid one of the directional mines in its claymore splice position, covering where a truck's front end would sit if it tried to bull the curve again. The mine was set on a pressure bridge trigger wired to a manual kill switch inside the office. I didn't arm it fully. I tested the circuit with a dummy trip and confirmed the relay closed. The trigger doctrine on the wall had one last line: activate only on confirmed vehicle attack and after last warning. I stayed true to that line. I clicked the manual simplex to live standby, but left the safety intact. One of the men attempted to cross the barrier again in the late afternoon. He walked close to the position where the mine would cover the axle and reached under with bolt cutters. I toggled the speaker and spoke 2 words, slow and even: leave now. He scoffed and continued. I hit the floodlight in the empty bay to disorient and to change the visual pattern. I wanted him to make the next move with less information, not more. He moved his hand deeper, then his fingers closed on the cutter. He did not pull. He looked for an angle to hide from cameras. That hesitation was enough. The driver tried to spin the truck for one more roll. I activated the mine. The detonation was focused. It disabled the truck in the X. The explosion knocked the truck's driveline and sprayed the front axle with metal and dirt. 2 men were burned back. One managed to run, and the other collapsed. The rest of the crew leapt and retreated. I was not looking for casualties, but I had to accept consequences. The mine did its job. It kept the truck from moving. It removed the threat in terms of vehicle momentum. That was the measure I used, not the body count. I walked out later and inspected the position. The metal fragments had gouged the bumper and torn the radiator from its mounts. The pickup would need a tow that night. I took a deep breath and logged the activation time, reason, and supporting evidence onto the mine map. Then I disarmed the adjacent array and placed the manual safety back. Night closed in with quiet and a sense of the block restructuring itself. The raiders had retreated broken. I could see long-term results already. They had one less vehicle, they had new caution, and they had an engineer's note now about my capability. I tightened the pallet curve with an extra strap, put up a new decoy jacket on a pole at the blind corner, and repositioned the dollies to create a false line that would force any future attempts to show their hand earlier. Then I sat down and cleaned the grenade launcher, checked its chamber, wiped soot from the barrel, and reinforced the foam seat where I stored the rounds. I wrote a new rule onto the board: grenade launcher authorized for vehicle disable only, fire only with 2-man confirmation or immediate threat. The aftermath took a few hours of work. I walked the damaged truck for salvageable parts from behind the curve once morning came. There were tool pouches and a pair of gloves I took and logged. I recorded descriptors of faces I had captured on the turret feed and sent the encrypted image to Tarek with the rooftop radio. He replied late that afternoon with a note. He had spotted similar plates farther north on an earlier run, likely the same crew. He suggested a pattern and a probable staging area. I copied it into my map and added it to the planned next passes list. The city learns fast. So do those who live on the edges. The mine made them change tactics. The disabled truck made them come back with ladders and ropes rather than brute force solutions. My response had to be the same: predictable, measured, and documented. Cruel? Maybe. Fair? I thought so. The rule on the board was simple. You can ask for water or a map. You cannot bring ladders to my fence. When night fell for real, the wedge thinned as regular patterns resumed. I checked every camera feed, cleaned the lens on the turret, and sat with Burke while I recorded the entire incident into the main log. I dated each entry, signed it with my initials, and filed 2 copies, one in the safe and one under the bench that held the wired trip map. I capped the day by tightening the bridge hinge pins and testing the roof route once, slow and deliberate, 68 seconds empty, 92 with Burke. I wrote the numbers again and added one more caution: expect countermeasures, expect return. Then I turned off the light and let the place breathe in its measured darkness. Morning came with a dry wind and a low grey over the industrial roofs. I woke before first light, slid my boots on, and checked the battery panel. Solar had dropped to standby overnight, and the bank held at 79% under load. I made coffee on the camp stove, measured the 2 cups, and drank them while scanning the monitors. The turret felt fine. The bridge hinge showed no new play. Burke nosed my hand for a biscuit, and then went back to the door, where he could watch both the greenhouse and the lane. I packed a small kit for a run: a full jerry can of diesel, rope, 1 sealed ammo crate of .308 Winchester, 2 boxes of 9mm, 3 hand-thrown smoke rounds for the launcher, and the key to the pump house stash. I walked the path to the lake with the truck warm and ready, keeping the route tight to shade and avoiding the main drag. The lake stash was a plan from the start. A small motorboat wrapped in brush sat under the collapsed boathouse behind an empty summer cottage. Inside the dry hatch, I kept a roll of poly, a small hand pump, a first aid kit, a radio with a charged battery, and a pair of sealed water cases. I reached the house and worked the hatch free. The plywood was brittle but intact. I pulled the tarp and verified the mattress, the stash bag, the battery bank home. The radio checked in weak on AM but enough for voice. I left one of the sealed water cases under the tarp and refreshed the dry bag with 2 more dehydrated rations in vacuum pouches. I noted the date on the boat lid and left a small smear of grease as my mark so I could tell if anyone else had been there. On the drive back, the truck felt heavier. I kept it low in the ruts where tire noise dampened against gravel. When I pulled up to the range, the pallet curve looked the same from a distance, and I allowed myself to think it was a simple run. I parked behind the canopy, but before I shut the engine, I looked at the west wall and saw a new shape. A dark van parked 3 houses down, half hidden by the night shadow. It was quick to appear, and quick to make me tense. I cut the engine, but this time I kept movement minimal, and slowed my breathing by focusing on the steps I had memorized. I closed the canopy door, moved the truck under cover, and walked to the office window to check the feeds. The van's occupants were a scouting team, 2 men and a woman in the back with a pair of rifles wrapped in blankets. They moved quietly, but their actions left a pattern. Eyes down, hands warm on triggers, checking angles, counting eaves and spans like engineers. They were looking for a place to stage. I watched them walk the block in an arc, and then settle in a shadow that allowed line of sight to the curve but not to the bridge. I went through the checklist in my mind, and then added new items. Rigged the decoy light to run a random pattern, moved the dollies to change the silhouette at the blind corner, and set the trip washers with a shorter throw so any attempt to cut the chain would ring a louder note. They tested the chain at first light 20 minutes later. The jarred can line registered on the motion logging as an analog spike. The turret turned its head and sent a low alert to the tablet. The first man set a ladder at the far post while another tried the strap again. I keyed the external speaker and used the voice I had practiced. Flat, slow, and without threat. Leave the line. Walk away. He crowded the ladder, looked for a handhold in the pallet curve, and that was when I decided I would not waste the next warning on words. I engaged the launcher, but this time I used a smoke round into the bed of the scouting van. Not to destroy, but to displace and to mask the shot signatures. The smoke roiled out, the van driver cursed, and the woman in the back ducked. In the space that created, the turret added 2 suppressed .22 caliber bursts at the back corner, where a man was about to secure a strap. The combination broke them long enough for the truck next to them to pull away and leave 2 figures exposed. One ran down the block and disappeared in the alleys, and the other dove into the ditch and later tried to sneak around the hospital lawn. The point was to make the price of staging higher and to buy time. That morning taught 2 things. They were adapting, and I needed to be 10 steps ahead. I cleaned the launcher, checked the propellant profile, and resealed the storage in the locker with an inert bolt on the lid. I marked the event in the log: smoke engagement, scout disperse, follow-up reconnaissance required. Tariq answered an hour later on the rooftop radio with coordinates of another van seen to the north side market. He advised against a hot chase, suggested instead to let them overreach and to map the route they took. We both made notes. 4 days after the smoke engagement, a migration came across the low riverbed farther down. The wedge filled twice the size of the previous cycle, and with raider scouts still circling, the mathematics changed again. I shifted to deeper suppression and rotated the mine array into a part-time armed state. Not all mines were live at once. I wired the primary claymore to a remote arm switch inside the office and left the other slots as decoys for psychological leverage. I do not like to use mines. I treat them as a medical supply that you do not give out unless someone's life depends on it. The math was simple. One vehicle with a load to force through the curve would crush everything in a second. The mine removed the vehicle option. When 3 vehicles approached on the second day of the migration, the lead driver thought the math was still in his favor. He accelerated and tried to run the curve in a single push. I took a long look at wind, angle, and where the vehicle would rest once momentum decayed. I engaged the claymore aimed to take out the drive pulley and lower control arm. The truck faltered and settled with a broken differential burst, metal and grease painting the gravel. Men tried to push. They tried to crawl under to roll the axle out. They failed. A pair of them escaped into the night. The rest holed up near a pile of rusted refrigerators. That night, I walked the perimeter with a headlamp and collected the bolt cutters they had abandoned. Tools tell stories, and I filed these under enemy kit. I catalogued serials, included photography, and radioed a small set to Tariq for corroboration on his end. The migration that week taught me to change bait points. I reworked the pallet curve by adding 3 extra pallets on skids and installing a diagonal breakaway board that would drop and catch a vehicle's bumper under a hook, which would then latch and resist further motion. It was mechanical. It required no explosives, only proper angles and a heavy hinge. The new system forced a driver to stop and then exposed him to turret suppression from angles the driver could not cover. The mechanical catch bought time and reduced the need to arm mines. I documented the build plan with diagrams and step counts and stapled the printout under the office bench. As the weeks continued, the nest became easier to find. Tariq's map and my own notes overlapped into a pattern. Cool places with running water, shaded basements, culverts where the scent pooled, abandoned stores with tile floors. The nests were not dens so much as logistics nodes where numbers could assemble without venturing into the sun. I mapped them with red circles. I also mapped where they would move when the wind shifted. My drives into town shifted from supply runs to reconnaissance runs. I spent a morning in a ruined hardware store taking measurements of a culvert that fed a nest. I wrote those numbers in my notebook and created a plan. When nests grow past 20, avoid direct engagement. If they were under 12, a small puncture in their line with a few precise shots would push them to move. Burke's role changed with mapping. He learned that nests respond to certain human scents and noises. I trained him to ignore stray fodder and to move to a point on my hand signal, where he could distract a single straggler if needed. He never attacked an entire cluster, and I practiced that rule until it was muscle memory. On a test run, I sent him out with a whistle pattern I had taught him months earlier. He trotted into a shallow nest, barked once on signal, and then danced back to the step I signaled for. The disturbed infected turned their attention for precious seconds. It was enough to take a single head-off shot and clear a path for me to place a small decoy that would change their drift. I logged the test and labeled it dog distraction, safe at range. The second skin idea matured into layers that functioned under stress. I had the outer pallet curve, the inner retainer with sliding dollies, the roof bridge, the fallback sally, and the pull-through corpse corral. Now I added the decoy courtyard with a timed lamp that would blink in patterns inconsistent with the turret feed and give me an early momentary visual mislead. It was cheap, effective, and bought seconds more than a single static barrier. I rewired it to the secondary battery and added a photocell that would disable it in direct sunlight. Only dusk and pre-dawn would see it active. One night, the second skin was really tested. A coordinated push came at 2 in the morning. A heavy migration moving south plus a team of raiders trying to collapse the fence with a winch. I was awake because I never trusted deep night when the moon is thin. The turret registered a mass and then a pattern of 4 fast-moving silhouettes cutting across a roofline toward the rear gate. The minefield at the east corner was live on manual for that slot. I fired trained suppressed shots across the alley to shape the herd and used the turret for angles my arms could not reach without exposing myself. The winch started to scream as it tried to pull the gate. It was a clear sound that carries and draws. I had one option to stop it. The grenade launcher was loaded for vehicle disable. I dialed the exact angle I had practiced on the engine bay, aimed at the winch system and took a single disabling round. The launcher struck the winch housing and the cable went limp. Men cursed. A flare of light from the launcher burned the night air short and then smoldered. The migration reacted to the flare and pushed against the fence in a dozen places at once. I stepped through the cadence. 2 suppressed shots. Pause, 1 shot. Pause, rotate to the other port. The turret automatically engaged a man trying to climb in the confusion, and then a miner I had not expected tripped the claymore and immobilized a second vehicle. In 20 minutes the entire attack had lost its plan and devolved into scattered flight. The morning after, the fence held but had new scars. The pallet curve had a burned section from a flare canister. I walked the line and collected fragments. I checked the bridge pins and counted rounds. Webbing from the ladder lay tangled in the ditch, and I photographed it for the log. I wrote down faces from the turret feed and matched them to earlier images in the file. 2 men had minor burns from the combined bursts. They left behind a bag of fasteners I salvaged and catalogued as potential tools for future builds. The mine log showed 2 activations, both effective. I marked each with time, reason, and evidence. At week 40, I added a new mark on the cinder block. The tally had taken on a new rhythm, not just weeks, but milestones. I wrote the date and under it, second skin tested held. I cleaned the weapon systems, replaced springs, oiled suppressors, and checked point of impact again on the carbine. In the greenhouse, the beans had climbed 2 inches in the last 4 days, and the first tomato showed a green nub. Growth matters. It keeps planning honest. I took time that week to trace a routine. Every morning at first light I checked the battery, the fuel reserve, the turret feed, the rain diverter, and the greenhouse pump. Every afternoon, I walked the nest's perimeter and crossed off any that had washed out or changed hands. Every night I tested the bridge with a timed run and notebooked the seconds. The checklist read like the margin of a trade ledger, and my life felt like an account to reconcile at the end of the day. In the end, the long night came like a slow storm rather than a single flash. It began with an expectation. The raiders had been pushed back, but they had not left the city. They waited, and they learned. On the 3rd month after the first big push, they returned with support from 2 other crews. They tried to coordinate a sweep and a cut. They used the burn from a disabled vehicle as cover, and they moved equipment in new ways. I watched them on camera and then made a choice to use the roof bridge. I loaded a small pack with 2 full magazines, the radio, a sleep roll, and the extra battery. I set Burke's harness, and we walked the roof route together as if it were a normal drill. Only this time I took the long angle across to the truck canopy and dropped into the pallet alley with the door sealed behind me. The upper alley gave me access to a side gate 3 blocks over that I had prepped months before as a temporary fallback. The path was narrow, but it was covered and allowed me to approach the pump house without crossing the main road. I moved slow, measured, and checked all roof lines for movement. The city had become a set of corridors, and I had made maps of the corridors. At the pump house, I crawled inside the hidden cache, took out a fresh radio and a pair of dehydrated meals, and then waited. I listened for the sound of heavy feet on the road. In the distance, I heard it. Synchronized pounding that comes from a group trying to march with purpose. My radio crackled with Tarek's voice. He had eyes on 3 teams converging to the south. He could not engage. He said, plainly, to make the call I needed. I breathed, ran the map in my head, and then set 2 triggers on the fallback lane. a smoke canister to mask our movement, and a timed flash to give the impression of a man at work on the roof. The plan was to fall back to a cleared house 2 blocks west, burn a trail of light to attract the migration away, then return under cover to retake the range once the herd passed. We executed the fallback. The smoke brightened the dark, and the migration stepped toward it. The raiders moved in to investigate and were met by the wedge on the wrong side. Their movement funneled them into a choke where the claymore and turret combined to keep 1 vehicle stalled, and 2 men incapacitated enough to scurry for cover. The remainder scattered, grabbed by the migrating mass. It was messy. It was efficient. We retook the range at dawn when the herd had passed. I counted the magazines and found 3 rounds missing from the carbine and 2 from the turret box. I replaced the springs and wrote the numbers on the log. After the storm, I took the time to walk the city farther than usual. I marked 3 new nests on my paper map and drew a line showing the migration corridors, how they moved with the wind and away from sun patches. I taped the new map to the office wall next to the tally marks. The new map looked like machinery. It made the city legible. I wrote under it, "Know the flow, build for it." Weeks later, the final test came not as a single confrontation, but as an ebb and a resume. The lost truck vendors moved on. The raiders who survived adapted into scavenger bands that avoided the curve entirely. The nest shifted and the map changed. The greenhouse gave me the first tomatoes that turned red on the vine. I harvested 3 and salted them lightly over a small fire in the back lot. The taste was clean and straightforward and did not make me sentimental. It made me practical. Food is survival and comfort. It is inventory and morale. In the final tally that I wrote on the day I added 4 new marks to the wall, I included the usual items: battery days left, magazine counts by caliber, water jugs on hand, and a new column labeled Allies. Under Allies, I wrote Mara, Tariq, and 2 initials of a man at the North Market who had left me a wrench and a canned ham. I wrote the rule for handling humans again: help through gaps, no one inside without vetting, trades only with paper and signatures. I underlined it twice. I checked the turret one last time on that afternoon and ran a new firmware test to remove any remaining false positives caused by drone insect swarms. I ran the suppressed carbine through a clean routine and confirmed 0 shift at 25 yards with the established subsonic load. I updated the mine map and removed 1 old activation marker after a controlled disarm. The list felt long, but it was the list that kept the place whole. I logged all changes and made 2 copies. The final night in that cycle was quiet. I let the cameras cycle for the entire rotation and sat in the office with my hands on my knees. Burke slept with his head on my boot. I pulled the cinderblock wall out from behind me and scratched the new column of tally marks. Week 48. I wrote a short line underneath: second skin intact, still standing. I left the note on the board for the next day: repair, ladder hinge, greenhouse net, turret lens wipe. Then I turned out the light and listened to the building do what it should: hold. When morning came, I went through the same walk that had become my measure. I counted fences, checked hinges, inventoried the seed trays, and updated the ally list. The world did not promise anything beyond the next measured act. The machines and systems I built responded to my behavior. If I fed them with maintenance, they fed me with time. If I ignored them, they would not. That is how it was. That is how I planned to keep it. Burke nudged my hand. I scratched behind his ear and added his name to the whiteboard in the corner under duties: patrol, distraction, morale. The list felt right. I left 1 final note in the log for the week, and for whoever might read it later: count, maintain, measure. Nothing moves that is not measured. Stay small, stay deliberate. Then I closed the log, put the key in the same mug I always used, and walked the route again. The range stood like a machine with human parts. It had been redesigned in days and rebuilt in weeks. The city around it had not been rebuilt, but I knew where the flow ran now and how to work with it. That knowledge was the only real currency left, and I had spent the last months turning it into a life that could, stubbornly, continue. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.